Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Love and Moxie. We're here for our second day, and what I'd love to start off with is hearing in the chat, why are you here today? So we started our first class with like, why are you in Love and Moxie? And there were different goals, different things there that people had that they wanted to get out of our time together. And today, my question is, what are you here for around conflict resolution? Today is focused on how we can use conflict to connect us. And if you're watching this recording, which I know many of you are watching this coming out after, and so I'd love for you to just think about, what do you want to get out of today? What are you here for? What's important for you? So insanely interested, I'm reading in the chat, and hearing different ways to resolve any conflict with all of my relationships. Okay, such a great point. So, I've talked about this before. All of these tools and resources are applicable, of course, to our primary relationship if you're in a romantic love relationship, but also to all relationships. And there are a lot of different tools in here. So I'm actually just going to go into the next slide and talk a little bit about that. This is the reminder of our 3 days. How to Be the Spark was our last one that was kind of light and playful. This one is conflict that connects us. And this is like communication, problem solving, and listening skills. And we're in this day 2. This day has so much good stuff that can just completely change your relationships. I'm going to send out the slide deck because a lot of these tools will be really helpful for you to see the visuals. I recommend that you take notes, that you do whatever you need to do to apply this material to yourself, but you can also, of course, look at these afterwards. So what I wanted to say about this, with whether this is for your primary relationship or for other relationships, is that you can apply these tools like one a week if you want. You can like talk to your partner and be like, let's try this one this week. You can apply them one at a time. You can come back to them and add a new layer, a new round. They all compound. I use them all the time. I use them with my kids. I use them with my husband. I use them with any other like family of origin, anybody that I'm in conflict with. I use these to support myself and to support them. And you can really take them one at a time. So I actually heard from a lot of you that you're watching this after you're watching the recording, and I also heard from a lot of you that you're watching it with your partner. So I also wanted to say that this class is an amazing one. This specific class is an amazing one to do together. Using the same tools at the same time can really change everything. So when you can also layer them up together. So together saying, this week we're trying this one. And the other thing that happens when you're using the same shared language around conflict is you tend to support each other a little bit more in the conflict because you can see your person trying. You're like, oh my gosh, they're doing that thing we just learned. They're doing it in such a clumsy way, but I can see that they're trying, right? Or you can decide together, let's try that thing. We're getting into the temperature is going up right now. Let's try that thing we learned. And so it can be a little bit easier to support each other when you have the same language, use the same tools, and you can understand what's happening and what the other person is doing. I am reading another comment here. I tend to close down during conflict. So common. So learning how to navigate it better internally and externally is such an improvement. Yeah. So when we shut down during conflict, we all have, of course, as we all know, that like fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or flock are the 5. And we all have some combination of those that we do. So I love in this comment how you're saying that there's the internal work to do first. So that's like emotional regulation. That's the number 1 tool. And we'll use some of these like interpersonal tools. And so let me talk a little bit more. We're going to get into some specifics around that. But show you again the agreements that we did in the first class. So use the chat to apply the things that we're talking about in here to you, so I can really answer any questions as they come up, so I can kind of create examples that apply to exactly what you are thinking about, what you're wondering about. And then if you're watching this recording, jot down your answers, pause the recording, talk to a person if you're doing it with your partner or with somebody else, and take notes, really answer the questions as I ask them. And then have fun with it. Conflict can feel heavy. Like this topic might not sound fun to you. But the truth is that when we're all going to have our ups and downs, conflict is going to happen in relationships. And navigating it together in a way that successful is like, feels so good. I cannot, like, I remember exactly how it felt the first times that I used some of these tools and felt it kind of crack open and be a lot more easy to walk through conflict with my husband. I just felt like my whole heart open and everything felt so much lighter. So you can get excited, can have fun with this stuff. We can know that developing these skills really is a way to just crack open our connection with our person and open up a future that is so much more connected and deep and loving and strong. So this class can be the spark. And I was just talking to somebody about this in the Bloom room. We were laughing this morning with the group that was there that did the first class as a recording, and they weren't there live. And they said, some of these things felt in the first class, it's really light and fun and like doe-eyed and sparkle-eyed in the way that we're looking at our partner, and all of those things are research-based and science-backed, that they're the things that partners do that are most successful in long-term relationships. And one of the people in the Bloom room was saying that she had heard one of my podcast episodes. It's called 5 Little Love Hacks. It's from really early on in the podcast. And she said, some of these tools that you taught in the first class are in there. And I remember 2 months ago, before I started in the Bloom room working with you, they felt really impossible to me. But since I've been doing emotional regulation work with you, since I've been using the regenerative thought model and managing my mind more for the last 2 months, this past weekend, after I took that relationships first class on being the spark, my fiance and I had this incredible weekend where all of those tools were really accessible to us. We had challenges that came up and we just had fun with them and we moved through them. But that is only because I've been doing the work in the last 2 months on my own mindset and my own emotional regulation. So that's just a note to say that the tools really work together. And sometimes if the more fun, playful ways of looking at your relationship and your partner don't feel accessible to you, it's probably a sign to do some of that internal self-regulation work first. All right, last time we also looked at how the secret to love and Moxie, science tells us that it's 2 things. The long-lasting, most successful relationships are really based on tiny daily habits and micro actions that we take over time that build up love and trust with our partner, number 1. And number 2 is the way that we think about our partner. So mindset is just so much of what makes our relationship successful. And we looked at how the quality of our thoughts will dictate the quality of our relationships with different people. And that's in the first class that we took. But you can see here the regenerative thought model, where we will experience circumstances. Your relationship is your circumstance. We'll have a thought about that, and it cycles through to create the results that we have in our relationship. And you can see right there in between result and thought in this slide, you can see the evidence collection piece. So we have a thought about our person. It creates a feeling in our body. We behave based on that feeling. We do take action and are in inaction based on how we feel. And that creates our result in our relationship. And then our brain says, see, I knew it, and collects evidence of the original thought. So we went through mindsets because our thinking creates our results. We went through mindsets in the last class that were fun and playful to help us see the best in the other person, help us stay flirty. And today is going to take us into micro actions that limit the withdrawals that come from conflict. So we also talked in the last class about how relationships are all about deposits and withdrawals. And we can take these micro actions, we can manage our mindset to make consistent deposits, positive interactions, positive deposits. And today, the way that we navigate conflict is not only putting in those deposits, but it's also limiting the withdrawals. So today is going to help us show up with boundaries and love even during the hard parts. So here we go. All right, so here is a really key concept to everything we're working on right now. The happiest couples, the most successful relationships, focus more on daily connection and micro actions than they do on conflict resolution. So I'm going to tell you actual evidence for this. Last time I talked about the Gottman Love Lab, the Gottman Institute and the Love Lab that they ran. And this is an example that came from theirs again. They had this 2-day summit, an in-person retreat, where they welcomed a whole bunch of couples and they had all the content for that day separated into these 2 separate days. One day was based on micro actions. So that's kind of day 1 and 3 of this class. It's not all based on the Gottmans, but I'm just saying the genre is like how we can create what we want in our relationship. And day 2 was conflict resolution. So they actually did a study and invited some people to both days, some to just day 1, and some to just day 2. They also actually had another group that just read their book and did it virtually, but we're not really going to talk about that group. So the first day was all about how to stay connected, how to take those micro actions, how to be in gratitude, how to look for what you like in your partner, a lot of what we talked about in the last class. Also how to make love maps of your partner's interior world, which is a tool that we're going to actually learn about in the last class, about how to keep learning about your person, keep being interested in who they are and how they're changing. And then that was the first class. Day of the Gottmans 2-day retreat. The second day was about conflict resolution. So after a year, they went back and looked at the success of all these partners. And what they found out was the people that had come to both days did the best. Then the people who just came to day 1 on the micro actions and creating love and mindset did second best and were far outpacing the ones that just came to conflict resolution. So we have seen this is an example of this, but other studies show that if we focus on the conflict sometimes can grow. So conflict resolution tools are really important, and it's more important to focus on what we are doing in creating the relationship that we want in all of our positive actions. So I just want to say that this is really important, but the other 2 days are where most of your focus should be. All right? It's a little bit surprising to me because conflict can really take us off course, but it's all about the many, many deposits and positive things that we're doing more than it is about mediating the negative moments. All right. So here's our first set of tools, and this is like the least literal tool focused slide. This is the one that's kind of about mindset too, but I will share a couple things you can actually take that are actions. All right, I love thinking about this in this way. It's you and me, baby. So like with my husband, I think about this all the time. It's you and me, baby. And he'll say this to me all the time. Even if we're about to get into something that starts to feel like it's escalating a little bit, he will literally look at me and be like, hey, it's you and me, baby. And it just totally grounds me again. And here's what I mean. We can, even in the midst of conflict, come from love. We can always choose to come from love. And here are 3 specific ways that we can do that we can focus in on you and me, baby. This is all about our relationship, even though we're in a hard part, and we can come from love. Number 1, we can take full responsibility at all times for the space between us. I once heard a person say, my husband and I both take 100% responsibility for the space between us at all times. Now that's ideal for sure, but all you can control is what you do. So if at all times you're taking responsibility for the space between you, what that will look like is that you're looking for ways to connect again when you're disconnected. You're looking for the ways that you can bring the temperature down. You're not just like being reactive and following what's happening. You're like, what can I do to reconnect us? What can I do to take us out of our trigger state and come back to a better place? What can I do to let us cool down, to use our safety word and let us cool down? And you can literally use the phrase, hey, I'm right here. We got this. Let's take a step back and just reconnect you in the moment. The second way that you can come from love is just to remember that conflict is momentary. It's finite. This is your person for the long haul. And what happens is that a lot of times when we get into conflict, all we see is the conflict. It just feels overwhelming and it feels like it's going to last forever. So just remember that conflict is momentary. It's finite. And you can say, hey, me, baby, we'll get through this. And that can really help both of you ground. The last thing that I want to say here is love. What love does can come from love is to pay more attention to what your person is trying to say than and what their meaning is behind the words than whether they said it perfectly. I notice that a lot of times in conflict, we get caught up in being offended by a word, getting defensive because of the way that someone says something. One hack that can help every single time is to listen under the words, to care more about what their need is that isn't getting met, or care more about what they mean than about whether they're saying it perfectly or whether they offended you with the words. Now, we'll get into boundaries. It doesn't mean let yourself be steamrolled. It doesn't mean let your person act however they want to act. Boundaries are super important. And I will never let someone yell at me. I will always leave a conversation if someone is like off the rails. And you can just use this basic premise that like, I'm going to try to listen for what they mean and for what they need, rather than being offensive. So that can be your intention. Rather than whether they are being offensive. This relates to the idea that like, if a kid is acting out, instead of reacting to them acting out, we think, what's the need that wasn't met? Are they tired? Are they hungry? Are they lonely? Did I not like pad this transition well? Did I not tell them what was going to happen next? The same applies to adults. When we can be like, what is this actually about? What is the need that's not being met here? It can really diffuse a situation fast. All right, now we're going to go into something fun, and I want to hear you in the chat and think this through if you're watching the recording, or tell the person you're watching it with. These are the different types of listening, and we're going to go into this whole next section on one of the core tools to conflict resolution, which is developing your skill of listening. So the first type of listening I want to talk about is superficial listening. So what do you think that is? Answer that, put it in the chat. What is superficial listening? And when might you be doing it? So another thing I want to say is that all of these different types of listening do have applications that are valuable. There's times and places for all of them. So superficial listening is like, you're hearing, yes, I'm seeing in the chat, I'm hearing the words, but not the meaning behind them. Excellent. And maybe you're not even hearing the words, like you're nodding and you look like you're listening, but you're not actually listening. And superficial listening, maybe sometimes you're in class, maybe you're listening to a podcast, you're not actually listening. Like all of those things, except for not right now, obviously, are times when you can practice superficial listening. But when you're with your partner, you really want to catch yourself if you're nodding and making it seem like you're listening and you're not. This is not a type of listening to use with your partner. What about fix-it listening? What is that, and when might it actually be appropriate? So fix-it listening is like, I'm listening to fix the problem. I'm listening to you and I'm going to solve your problem. And this can be appropriate when someone asks us for it. When someone's like, hey, can you help me solve this? It can be appropriate when we're like somebody's boss. It can be appropriate when together we're trying to solve a problem. Generally, when we're in conflict, it's not the most helpful tool. And you can think about how many of us go to fix-it listening. A lot. I see it a lot in conversations. I experience it a lot. When we're just trying to share where we're at, the other person tries to fix it. And sometimes it can feel really dismissive and invalidating. All right, what about self-referential listening? Some of us, we can all ask ourselves, like, which of these do we do? Which of these do we default to? Or you can also think, do you know someone that defaults to self-referential listening? What is that? It's when I'm listening to you talk about what you experienced, but I'm really thinking about what it was like for me. Or I'm thinking about a time that I experienced something similar. Or I'm thinking about how what you said applies to me. And again, we're not really hearing the other person. When we're trying to fix, when we're thinking about ourselves, we're not actually hearing the other person. Which takes us to the last type of listening, and the type that we should always try to be in when we're listening in conflict or just listening to our partner in general, which is active listening. I'm listening to understand you and to understand what this experience is like for you. I'm not thinking about myself. I kind of disappear for the moment when it's your turn to talk. I'm not dumping my experience on you. I'm not projecting on you. I'm not assuming that we're the same. I'm not correcting you because I was there. I'm not fixing it for you. I'm not picturing my experience as you describe yours. I'm getting curious. And I just want to say, you'll hear me say this a lot in this class, that being curious about somebody else's experience is a beautiful boundary. It's the best way to have a boundary because we're not mixing up my experience with your experience. And that's what keeps it clean. That's what keeps us from getting triggered and elevated, is when I know your experience is yours and mine is mine. And we don't muddy up the space between us. What's yours and what's mine. All right, I forgot to say at the beginning of this, by the way, that I'm going to take questions throughout instead of waiting all the way to the end because we're covering so many different tools today. So any questions that pop up for you, pop them in the chat. All right, so these are the different types of listening. They all have times when they're appropriate. When we're in conflict, when we're with our person, we want to go into active listening. All right. You've heard me say listening is a boundary. Let me tell you what I mean about this. And if you can really get this in your mind when you're listening to your partner in conflict resolution, it is an absolute game changer. It will absolutely change your life and change your relationship. So we just talked about how when we get in trouble is when we forget where we end and our partner begins. When we forget that their experience is theirs. Like the clothes that they're wearing those clothes. We're wearing the clothes we're wearing, they're wearing the clothes they're wearing, and we don't get that confused, right? If we can think about it in that black and white of a way, their experience is theirs. It's on them. They're wearing that experience. They're wearing their perspective. That's their world over there. Our experience is ours. We're wearing our perspective. We're not going to get confused. So when we're listening, we can listen in a way that's just so curious about what they're experiencing. We're not going to jump into it and say, but I experienced something different. That's irrelevant. We're just listening to understand them. We get into conflict when we mix up what we're talking about. It gets gray and murky. It gets like really, I like to think of communication as clean or not clean. Really clean communication is when we either listen to understand them or speak to share our experience or speak to ask questions about theirs, but we keep it really clean, what's ours and what's theirs. I see a question here, hearing the words but not the meaning behind them. Oh yeah, that was one of the one of the listening styles. All right, so I have on here the talking potato. And I said trade it and zip it. Okay, so what I mean about this is there's this time, I used to work leading educational programs for kids, and we had talking sticks. And it's like an old school, very simple way to think about listening, but it works for adults. And if you can have a mental talking stick in your head, it is so helpful to navigate conflict with your partner. So the reason I call it the talking potato is because once my kids were fighting with each other and we were sitting on the ground in the kitchen and I could not get them to listen to each other. So I reached next to me to this fruit bowl and I grabbed a potato, it was a sweet potato, and I handed it to one of them and I was like, you have the talking potato. If you're holding the potato, you get to talk. And if you're not holding the potato, you do not get to talk. Your only job, if you're not holding the potato, is to understand what the person holding the potato is saying. What did they experience? What did they mean? What was this like for them? And then you're going to have the potato. And the reason I think this metaphor, even though it's weird and ridiculous, is helpful is that we can go into that active listening when we know it's going to be our turn. Like eventually we're going to get our turn and the other person is going to give their listening to us. They're going to give us a turn. They're going to take a turn listening to us. So when the other person is speaking, we're not going to talk. We're not going to think about ourselves. We're going to practice active listening and just ask questions to make sure we understand. So I'm going to share exactly how to do that. And I see in the chat, I might use just saying the phrase talking potato during my next conflict with zero context. I love that. And then once you give the context, one thing that the talking potato does is it de-escalates because it makes everybody laugh. If you're like, hey, talking potato, it kind of makes you smile and laugh. It can be like a safety word, which we're also going to talk about later. All right. The clean listening is, it's not about me. So if you're talking about your experience, let's say you and I just got into some kind of conflict and now we're talking about it. Even if you're talking about me, and I realize how hard this is when it's your partner, but let's say in general in relationships, I like to have the mindset that other people's opinion of me is none of my business. That what other people think about me is just, it's on them. It's just their experience. Now, I can be open to hearing it. I can hear feedback. I can learn from feedback. But whatever they think about me is their world, right? And so when our partner is talking about what they experienced, we tend to really take it personally. And we can just pause and remember they are seeing the world through their experience. They're seeing themselves in the mirror of the world. Whatever they experienced is all about them, and get really curious to understand what their brain is doing, even when it's about us. So here's exactly how to do this. When your partner's talking, you're going to listen and try to really get it. Then, when they're done talking, you're going to say, okay, so, and you're going to repeat back what you heard. The most important thing about this is to not be weird. So don't be mechanical, don't be robotic, don't literally say, so what I heard you say is, unless you guys like doing that, that's fine. But try to be yourself. Try to just be authentically yourself and say, okay, I think I get it. So you were pissed because this happened. You were pissed because this is the impact that it had on you. And that sucked because you wished this other thing happened, right? Like talk like you would normally talk, but repeat back because that is how the person understands you heard them. And then you say, is that right? Did I get that right? And so they have a chance to correct you. Here's another thing that really blows people's mind when they get it. Like so much of the time, we are more dedicated to holding on to what we think someone meant rather than checking to make sure it's actually what they meant. So we make an entire universe up about what they meant, but we don't check for understanding. And we're so attached to that story that we created that we can go down a whole rabbit hole that was never real to begin with. So it's so important to check and say, did I get that right? And the last step is to say, did I leave anything out? Anything else you want to add? And what happens in conflict when we let the other person say everything they need to say, and we validate it by saying, okay, so this is what I think. This is what I think you experienced. Do you want to add anything else? Do you want to correct anything? Is there anything else? It's like a balloon all of the air goes out of. Like all the tension goes out of the person and they drain the tension when they get to say every single thing that they wanted to say. Then you can ask follow-up questions only if they're non-passive aggressive. Only if your questions are really to understand. Okay, so I have a question about that. You said this one thing and I have a follow-up question. I want to understand a little bit more. You got to make sure they're clean questions. They're not passive aggressive. They're not manipulative in any way. You ask them questions, and what happens is they completely come out of fight or flight. They completely come out of being triggered. They get to say everything they wanted to say, and then it gets to be your turn. And when we can really do the talking potato steps like that, we end up really hearing each other. So this is a thing that you can practice together with your partner, the talking potato and this listening framework. It might feel a little weird and mechanical at first if you're repeating back to each other. Just give it a shot and laugh if it feels weird. You'll get more and more comfortable with it. And this is an incredible way to stop the back and forth conflict, pause it, have each person take a turn and support one another. All right. Here's some other parts to this. The 2 things are true hack. Think about a time when you had the same experience with somebody. Maybe you went to the same movie, the same sports event, the same class that you took, and you had totally opposite experiences of it. Put it in the chat if you can think of one that's like super salient. I was on my podcast talking about one of these where I went to a town hall meeting at my kid's school and I was like, dang, we nailed it. That was an awesome town hall. That was all such helpful content. And then I saw the class chat in my kid's school and they were talking about how horrible the town hall was. And I was like, wow. And they were talking about how horrible the topics were and how unuseful they were. And we were at the very same meeting, watching the very same things being presented, and we had 100% opposite experiences of that town hall. And I've had that many, many times. I happen to like look for the best in things and have a pretty optimistic set point to my brain. So I very often have this experience where I will have the same experience as someone else and see it totally differently. Think of times when you've had that experience yourself. This is happening all the time with our partner, right? That's what arguments are about. We are both in our own lived experience, looking from our own perspective in our brain that has been built out of our own, experiences ages 0 to 7 and then 0 to 20. And we're just repeating all of our own perspective on how we see the world and how we're filtering reality all the time. So we can be exactly in the same scenario as somebody else with our partner and have totally different experiences. One of the key tenets to listening, in the way that we just talked about it, is this idea that two things are true. What you experienced is as true as what someone else experienced who had the opposite experience. Just because you're validating and listening and hearing to an experience that was true for them, it doesn't mean that yours wasn't true. Even if you were standing right there with them and you have the opposite experience. When we can actually bring this into an argument or conflict with somebody else, it is totally game changing. I can sit here and listen to everything you experienced and just be curious and understand, even when you have the totally opposite perception. Validating your person does not mean that you're invalidated. And the other thing I want to say here is understanding and validating does not mean you agree. It is a boundary. When you can be this huge, loving presence that is like, I understand you. I'm listening to understand you. You're saying things that I totally don't agree with. And I've had the opposite experience. Maybe you're even saying things about me, but I am listening to totally understand you. And I'm going to think about whether I agree later. I may or may not agree. It is such good medicine for conflict. It will actually totally deflate the conflict when you can just hear and understand. And I'm seeing in the chat, it happens all the time between my friend and I. So we can experience the exact same thing, have opposite views on it, and both be right. So this is one of the things that makes the talking potato work, because it calms your nervous system when they're saying things that you don't agree with. You don't care. It doesn't matter. It's not going to activate you because you know everything that you experienced is still just as valid and just as true. And you hearing them doesn't invalidate that. All right, here's another huge one. And I really want you to think about this because I never see people doing this until I train them in it. Okay. Whoever brings up the topic has the floor. If you come to me and you say, hey, I have something that's not working for me and I want to talk to you about it. You brought up the topic. We're going to talk about that topic. So my job is to hear you and hear what you're saying and respond to that topic. Now, if I have something that's ancillary, that's related, that's parallel, that's like my experience really close to that topic, what I see is, and what I experience in conflict, is people bring that up instead of responding to the topic that you brought up. And the reason is because we don't see them as different topics. We see them as the same. They are different topics. And here's what I mean. I'm going to give you examples, okay? And I want you to think about how you do this, okay? If I come and I say, hey, you showed up late to that date that we had, and I was so excited about that date. And when you showed up late, I was really disappointed. I felt pretty sad. If I say that, and the other person says, well, I was having a hard time getting my work done that day, and my work ran late and I'm just needing more hours at work, that's a different topic. I am responding to you without acknowledging what you, or the other person is responding to me without acknowledging what I said. Staying on topic sounds like, oh God, it felt disappointing that I showed up late. I did show up late. I'm sorry. We're going to respond to that topic first. Later we can bring up, hey, one thing that will help me show up on time is to get more hours at work. We can bring that topic up later. But when we respond to whatever the other person said with our topic, we're being self-referential and we're basically invalidating them. So here are some other examples. If I come to you and I say, hey, I feel hurt, and you say, well, I feel hurt, different topic. We're going to stay on the topic of my hurt until we address that, and then we can move on to your hurt. If I come to you and I say, I need help with the laundry, and you say, well, I need help with the dishes, we think it's the same topic. It's not. We think it's the topic of the household chores, but I never got my need for the laundry addressed or validated at all. All right. Anybody have questions about this? Because it is a thing that I never see people doing successfully until they actually get trained on it. So the idea is, if you bring something up, I'm going to respond to what you brought up specifically before I bring up a different topic. And a beautiful resource on this is Becky Kennedy. And I'm trying to think of the name of her book that this comes up in. I will send it out afterwards. Oh no, it's Good Inside. I see it on my bookshelf. Becky Kennedy's book, Good Inside, describes this really beautifully. Yeah, someone is saying the idea of getting my husband to do this seems impossible. I absolutely hear this. And one of the reasons is because our brains are not trained to see conversations as topical in this way, or conflict as topical. So one thing that I highly recommend doing is asking your partner, hey, can we try something? I love you so much, and I really get frustrated when we get into these arguments, and I learned a thing that blew my mind, and I think if we could just try it, it would be really cool. It would really help me, and I think it would help us stay connected and not get into conflict. Are you down to try it? It's called staying on topic, or one topic at a time, or whatever. And your husband might say no. But I recommend with these tools, just making them super low bar and saying, hey, would you try this with me? I would love to try this with you. Here's how it works. And then you can try it, and then you can always do a retro after the conversation about what worked and didn't work. All right, this is the idea of staying on topic. So we've got two things are true, we've got staying on topic, and we've got active listening with a framework for replying and repeating back what you heard. All right. So I want to review that the energy that you put into your relationship should be coded to match the energy you want to get out of it. So I just want to pause and have everybody reflect for a second. If you want connected conflict, you got to go first. You got to be the first one, the catalyst to connect you in the conflict. If you want love and compassion, you got to be the change. You got to go first. Going first is one of the things that we learned about in the last class. So this idea of the energy that you want to get out can be super helpful when we're trying to intentionally design how we want to be in our relationships. When we're like, what do I want this to feel like? Well, I want it to feel connected. I want it to feel peaceful. I want it to feel calm. So if that's the energy that I want to experience in my relationship, that's what I got to put into it right now. I got to put in calm, connected, peaceful. So this is a way to just set your intention for how you want to show up in your relationship and in conflict. And I'm going to look at I'm going to show you this next slide as a tactical way to do this. So the Gottmans, again, in their study in that love lab, last time we looked at how they found that a relationship needs 20 positive interactions for every one negative interaction in order to last, in order to be a healthy relationship, okay? They also found that during conflict, couples, conversations need to have 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction in conflict. That really blew my mind because I feel like that's not normal. right? That's not what I think of with conflict. I think of conflict as a lot of negative interactions in a row. So I want us to think about, what does it look like to give positive interactions, to have positive interactions? When we look at this coding of our energy, the energy we're putting in, what is that positive interaction energy that we're putting in to create the 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative? What ideas do you have? What will you do? Think about that. Put them in the chat. So when I think about this, I think of listening is a positive interaction. Repeating back what I heard is a positive interaction. Not shaking my head and sighing is like, but actually like making eye contact and nodding is a positive interaction. Saying, I'm sorry. Fuck. That was like not what I wanted to happen. That was not my intention. I'm so sorry. That's a positive interaction. Like taking responsibility for things. Positive interaction. So what are positive interactions that you can actually imagine yourself taking on this week? What are some ways that you can practice that? Remembering that 2 things are true. Validating their experience even when you're like, oh, mine was the absolute opposite. This drove me nuts. Doing the work to still validating their experience. Still validate their experience. All right. So make a goal for how you can put in more positive interactions even during conflict. All right, here's another. Now we're kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of conflict. I'm going to move a little quickly because we have a lot more to get through. All right. You and me against the problem. When we're in conflict, our brain tells us that it's us against the other person. That perspective has us thinking in terms of good and bad, the good guy, the bad guy. One of us is right, one of us is wrong. Black and white thinking, it either happened this way or it didn't, instead of 2 things are true thinking. So here's the reset. If I'm not allowed to be the problem and you're not allowed to be the problem, then what's the problem? It's you and me against the problem. We're sitting on the same side of the table, looking at the problem, trying to solve the problem. A quick note about this. Just think about whether your brain tends to go to blame or shame. So a lot of times we oscillate between the 2, blame, shame, during conflict. This person shouldn't have done this, but I really feel guilty about what I did. Oh, but they shouldn't have, and we oscillate back and forth. Some of us tend to go to shame. Man, I really messed that up. This is all my fault. Some of us tend to go to blame. This is, that jerk. Where does your brain go? And if you're not allowed to make them the problem, literally in any of your relationships, the person can't be the problem. And you can't be the problem. Then it's you and me against the problem. And here are the 5 things that problems are usually about, that conflict is usually about. Every conflict can get boiled down to 1 or more of these. Number 1, history or an incident. So if it's you and me against the problem, we can go into problem-solving mode and figure out which of the 5 of these is it. Maybe more than 1. So sometimes history or an incident can be 1 single event that we need to come back from and problem solve and talk about and practice listening around. I want to understand what it was like for you. You want to understand what it was like for me. And we need to make requests of things to go differently in the future. It could be a difference in values. So maybe I value independence and you value collaboration. And we're having an argument about whether we do everything together. It's a difference in values. So we can talk about that. And we can talk about how we can meet both of our values. Sometimes it's a difference in information. Well, I thought that the reservation was at this time, and you thought the reservation was at this time, and our conflict is actually about that. Sometimes it's differences in expectations about process or decisions. Well, I thought you were going to ask me before you filed the taxes so I could look at them. I thought you were going to ask me before I made this decision. I thought I was going to be a part of that decision. You thought you were going to make it on your own. And lastly, and most common for me, is differences around expectations around communication. Because I'm like such a communication nerd that I really expect for people to be active listeners and to communicate respectfully. And I'm like so off-put when someone does not. Whether that's in my personal relationships or out in the world when someone's just really not communicating well, in my judgy opinion, I get triggered. So it's helpful for me to think, oh, we have a difference in expectation about what communication looks like, respectful communication looks like. So really look at these 5 because it can really help you not make the other person the problem. It takes the gas out of it. All right, now here's a beautiful framework that you can use to have clean communication. First, say what happened and keep it objective. That means when this thing happened, no adjectives, no blame, no hyperbole, factual. When this factual objective thing happened, then you say, I experienced Y. When X happened, I experienced Y. This is a tool to embody owning our own emotions, knowing that our perspective is our responsibility. When this happened, I felt this way. I experienced this thing. And then step 3 is optional. It could be like, I know I tend to feel this way. I feel this way a lot in different circumstances, and I really see that this is something that comes up a lot for me. But you don't have to do this step. That's totally up to you. Sometimes it can be helpful. Sometimes step 3 can happen at the end. You can say, do you want me to tell you more about why this pops up for me? You can do it afterwards. Step 3 is optional. Step 1 is factual, objective. Step 2 is I experienced. And then step 4 is huge. It says, I'm not saying that was your intention. Or when you know that it wasn't the other person's intention, you can say, I know it wasn't your intention for me to experience that. And I still would love to make this request for how things can happen differently in the future. When you can remember this really 4-part framework, step 3 is optional, right? X happened. When you forgot to take out the trash, I felt really disappointed. And I know that wasn't your intention. I know you want to have my back. I know you want to contribute to the house. And because I get kind of overwhelmed with the amount of things to happen, I would just love to request that we don't forget to take out the trash when the trash comes. Is there something we can do together to make sure that doesn't happen? So you're just owning your own experience and your own reaction and reminding them that you know that it wasn't their intention, if that's true for you. Pop any questions in the chat. And again, I'm going to send these slides out so you're going to have them for reference. All right, another tool when we're sharing things like this is to be real. We very rarely just feel one way. And you can share that. So something that I often say is, I'm in a bind, or this is tricky because, to oppositional things. So for instance, I'm in a bind because I love you having your relaxation time. I love when you get to go and sit and chill because I know you work so hard. And at the same time, I really need help with stuff when you get home. So you're sharing not just like, I'm so pissed, I need help. You're sharing, I love you and it's important to me that you get this time and I need help. And then you can ask a question. Do you have ideas for how both could happen? So again, it's you and me against the problem. And it's not just one thing. That when we share what we value or that we care about the other person as we're asking for something different, it can absolutely disarm the conflict. So I call this being real, because in reality, we do have both things going on. We care about the other person, we care about their well-being, and we have a need. So when we say them both, it can really help. All right, next, and we're nearing the end here, is to assume positive intent. So we all have good intentions, even when we're being a brat. We all feel like we are the antagonist, the protagonist. We sometimes assign negative intent or motivation in a way. In the chat, someone's saying they're 100% a brat. I like to use the word brat to describe myself because it's kind of cute. So if I'm not proud of how I showed up in a moment with my husband, I'll be like, in my mind, I'll be like, well, that was bratty. And it's sort of more compassionate with myself. It like normalizes that none of us are going to be perfect all the time. But sometimes we're all bratty. We're a brat sometimes. So assigning negative intent or motivation to somebody else will create conflict and defensiveness really fast. So when we say to someone, I see this all the time in relationships. When people are in conflict, they add to whatever was bothering them. We just went through that whole 5-step communication, clean communication. They add something about the other person meaning to do it, or wanting them to feel bad or whatever they're adding around motivation and intent. When you do that, you're pretty much guaranteed to have more conflict. Okay? So stay away from always, never. Stay away from those like big hyperbolic statements that make the current situation conflate with all of the other times you've experienced things like this, and do not assign motivation or intent. The quality of your relationships is directly related to your assumption of other people's intent. If you assume people have negative motivation, your relationships will really suffer from that. So assume positive intent, because all of us always think we're the good guy. Even when we're being bratty, we think that there's a reason for it. We think we're doing a good job. We all are the heroes of our own journey. So just assume positive intent and things will go so much easier. So remember, in our last few tools, we're gonna cover sort of a couple fundamental ways to support what we talked about last time, which is take responsibility for your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. That's your side of the street. Set super clear and consistent boundaries. Boundaries are not threats. They are just saying, if X happens, Y, I will do Y. And then you got to follow through. So setting clear boundaries allows us to have so much more capacity to love, because we are clear and clean with what we're okay with and what we are not okay with. So when we set a clear boundary, it really stops our resentment. We don't resent people because we are only there for what we're there for. So setting a boundary says, if you're more than 15 minutes late, I'm going to take off. If you yell at me, I will leave the room. If you don't do the dishes, then I'm not going to do them for you. And then we don't resent the other person because we're not doing something that we're not willing to do. Okay? So set those boundaries to eliminate resentment, and just remember, you got to hold them. You got to hold yourself through the boundary hangover. When we set boundaries, we so often have boundary hangovers. And then make requests of what you need from somebody else. Last time we talked about making yourself easy to love by making requests that aren't that hard to do, that are pretty doable. Make those requests that are not that hard to do. Hey, it would really help me if we took out the trash on time. Hey, it would really help me if you gave me compliments throughout the day. That really helps me feel loved. The key with requests is that your emotional well-being is not dependent on whether the other person says yes or no. And I know that can be hard, especially with our primary relationships. But set your requests, set your boundaries, make your requests, and then manage your own emotions, because that is what you can control. All right, for our very end here, and we're almost here at the end of time, so I don't know that I will have time for Q&A, but you can always put them in the Telegram channel or send them to me. Last three is how to keep it cool. So we all do get triggered. We all do go into fight or flight. Here's how to keep it cool. Own your own body language. Head shaking, sighing, eye rolling, grimacing. This is not you keeping your side of the street clean. This is signs of really resenting your person, of contempt. That is a really harmful thing in relationships. So keep your body language clean. Saying that you're listening, there's a typo on that slide. Watch this. Saying you're listening with passive aggressive body language at the same time is very disorienting to someone. It's like something like 75% of our communication is subconscious and happening under the layer of the words that we're saying. It's nonverbal. And so we are having a whole conversation with the person that we're talking to based on our body language. So keep it clean. Keep your body language clean. So saying you're listening with passive aggressive body language feels like gaslighting. Okay, another way to keep it cool. We are not capable of empathy, creative problem solving, or imagination when we're triggered. There's no point in continuing to talk if one person is triggered. So if somebody's triggered, we got to first come down from that intensity. So have a safe word that helps you walk away. Our family uses the word dandelion. Anyone in the family can use it when they want to say, hey, I got to pause, we need to walk away. They can use it when someone's tone isn't, they don't like someone's tone. They're saying, I can't actually hear what you're saying because of the way you're saying it. So dandelion, I need us to pause. Or, hey, this is getting too escalated. We got to walk away and then come back. Dandelion, I can't talk. I can't keep talking right now. I got to walk away. Use a safe word if you need one. Or at least say, I'm going to walk away. And then take time to feel your feelings before you talk it through. Process your own emotions, and then you'll know what you actually want to talk to the other person about. So you can take time. Just communicate about the time that you're taking in a respectful way. Say, I'm not ready to talk yet. I need some time to process. Can we talk tomorrow morning? I need some time. That's always okay. But communicating that you're taking the time makes it respectful instead of ghosting someone, which is really, giving the silent treatment is really harmful. But if you're saying, I need time, I really can't talk yet, that's not the silent treatment. That's letting them know. It's not ignoring that they exist. It's saying, I got to take some space and time. All right, that is what I have got for you today in the Love and Moxie Class 2, how conflict can actually create connection. For our last class next week, it's all about the small daily habits that can keep it hot and keep you connected, and I'm really excited for that class to close us out. So this week, as you're practicing all of these, whether you're layering them all up, doing them one by one, please share out how it's going in whatever avenue you have, whether you're doing this with a partner, share it with them in the Telegram channel. If you're doing this live in real time, if you're watching it after the fact, jot things down, just share it out, email us, text us. We always love to hear how it's going. And thank you for being here. What a total honor it is to be here with you, have you here, and thank you for showing up for love, showing up for your relationships, and showing up for yourself. All right, keep it sparky. I'll see you next time.